great. We can make a dugout for our baseball field with these boards.
Let's go.
Give me a hand. Ooh, boogeyman.
Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. Oh, joy!
Let's rock.
It makes me wanna fart!
Dear Journal, it's me, Doug.
You have it!
Baby's gotta do what a baby's gotta do.
That was a hoot!
On your mark. Get set.
Oh, here it goes!
Welcome to Splat Attack, where we're taking it back to the slime-filled past. I'm your gaktastic co-host, Brett.
And I am your slime-tastic co-host, Alex. Brett, are you ready for round two?
I am. People probably weren't expecting us to do another versus so soon, but I figured it'd be pretty cool to have like a mainstream versus of Are You Afraid of the Dark versus Goosebumps, and then an exclusive for our patrons. So that's why we're here today, and we're gonna do Silent Servant versus Scarecrow Walks at Midnight because it's got to be said in that order, otherwise it doesn't flow quite as well. Yeah, it's Scarecrow themed, it's fun, and our guest today mentioned it to me, and I thought it'd be a great idea to do a versus. So here we are.
So who are you going to be facing off against this episode?
Well, let's bring him in from the cornfield. We got our straw man contender, the Burning Man himself, Jordy Durden from episode 6, favorite Halloween commercials, back for another round to fight with us. How you doing today, Jordy?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Yeah, I'm here to, fight for what I love, and I'm fighting for Goosebumps. I'm not the biggest Goosebumps fan in the world, but I put myself up on a high tier on that list.
I should have worn my Are You Afraid of the Dark shirt today. I didn't think of it.
Oh, we got some Children of the Corn in the ring today.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
we're gonna make popcorn out of you when I'm done. Things are gonna get heated real quick. You're defending.
Don't get me stalking.
Well, as we mentioned before, we're going to be doing another battle of Are You Afraid of the Dark versus Goosebumps. This is a Scarecrow theme this time around. So we got The Tale of the Silent Servant versus the Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, which is a Goosebumps book episode and also based off of book number 20 in the series by R.L. Stine. We're going to do a similar format as we did last time. So we're going to have 7 categories in total. We're going to have main characters, supporting characters, villains, story, scariness, use of Scarecrow themed, and does it hold up today? And Alex, once again, will be our judge. I'll be defending The Tale of the Silent Servant, and Jordy will be defending Scarecrow Walks at Midnight. Other than that, our basic rules are we want a good, clean fight, no insults, no swearing, just arguments presented with evidence with supported claims, and rebuttals and counterpoints only happen after the other person has spoken. I know we had quite a bit of interrupting when RJ and I kept rambling on about phone police and how Annie is a wizard or whatever. But
she's a witch. She's a witch.
A sorceress, a warlockess, whatever.
A warlockess.
Yeah, that was a fun one, but we thank RJ for his time, and that's probably the last time I'm going to talk about phone police.
I do want to mention before we get going on the episode, going back and watching both. It's not 90s, but Supernatural is one of my absolute favorite TV shows, and there was an episode where they had to face off against a Scarecrow, and Dean Winchester, the older brother, comes face to face with a Scarecrow who's just immobile at the moment, stares at it for just a moment, and this says, "Dude, you fugly." And going back and watching both of these episodes, every single time I saw a Scarecrow, I wanted somebody please say it.
Dude, you fugly.
You fugly.
You should make a meme or a gif of that, because there's plenty to look at in both of these.
Let's get this show started.
Let's get ready to versus. All right, so let's start things off here, Alex. Do you want to say like the basic info about each tale and then go into our argument points?
Absolutely. For the Tale of the Silent Servant, it is a Betty Ann tale written by Wendy Brotherlin. I hope I pronounced that
Brotherlin.
right. Brotherlin. See,
Yep.
thank you, Brett. And
welcome.
directed by Jean Marie.
Comio.
Thank you. And was released November 12th, 1994 as season 4, episode 7 of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Scarecrow Walks at Midnight was based on book number 20 of R.L. Stine's Goosebumps series. It was written by Scott Peters, directed by Randy Bradshaw, and was released as season 2, episode 14 of Goosebumps. As previously stated, we're going to flip-flop back and forth between each category, between each series, and we are going to start with Are You Afraid of the Dark? For main character. Take it away, Brett.
We have Jared Connor. He's a kid visiting his cousin Ann's family in farm country, and baseball occupies his mind just about every moment he's not talking to another character. He's also super protective of his glove, as we see. He's a vibrant and enthusiastic kid, and he is rather averse to doing chores. Then we also have Ann Peterson, who's playing baseball with him, who reminds me a lot of Rice from the Beethoven movies in the 90s. Like, she had a very similar face there. She's constantly like the nudging conscious of Jared throughout the tale because, you know, she's kind of the voice of reason. She's constantly trying to talk him out of things while he's like overtaken by his curiosity and wonder. So they balance each other out pretty well throughout the story in terms of, moral compass and what to do with the magical elements that they come across later in the tale. Jared tends to avoid responsibility, but what he lacks in respect, he makes up for in bravery. He's adventurous and loves to explore, which leads to him and Ann finding the titular Scarecrow to do their bidding. Well, Jared's bidding, actually. He's the only one that gives commands. Upon finding the Scarecrow, Jared immediately considers the possibilities of his usefulness, ranging from guarding the garden, building a dugout, and even eliminating any of his foes. Anne is cautious but level-headed. She's a bit of a coward, but in the 11th hour, she does the right thing when in danger, is threatening her family. She's played by Kimberly Warnett, and she balances Jared's reckless demeanor quite well.
And Jordy, do you have any rebuttals for the character?
So yeah, on Are You Afraid of the Dark? I agree with Brett that yeah, she is the voice of reason, but I felt in the episode she doesn't get her own character as much. But yes, she does. She is the voice of reason. But I feel like that is juxtaposing the fact that like Jared makes decisions that seem to make no sense sometimes, as opposed to like Jared, you know that this is like some weird, crazy supernatural thing, and this is like scarecrows. I mean, how hard is it for a dugout? And like, even when it's destroying everything around him, he's still like, no, I think we should hang on to this, scarecrow deal that we've got going on, where like nobody else would even agree. And he's kind of just like a little bit of a not great kid in the beginning when he breaks the window, and he just immediately blames it on his sister. Cousin, sorry. Yeah, Anne is has to put up with a lot, but yeah, as much as I'd say she's the voice of reason, it just seems like she's a normal person reacting to what's going on, less of like, hey everybody, this is the right thing to do, and it's more of like, this, if we want to survive through the next week, we probably shouldn't get evil scarecrows and seances involved. And she doesn't seem to really react the same, like if she was really the voice of reason as much. I feel like when they meet Crazy George,
not to be confused with you,
not Crazy Me, yeah. Why didn't she just like run right away? Why did she say, what's going on? We got to get out of here. They both stay and they listen to the ramblings of a crazy man for like what is an unnaturally long piece of dialogue in an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode.
We better hurry or Dad's gonna kill us.
Good death comes to those who wait.
We're just...
The dragons have been stolen. Have you seen my dragons?
We haven't seen any dragons.
The better for you then. Oh, such sorrow. I used to see rainbow-colored lights. Now, darkness. Such sweeping, Blackness. He made me this way. His evil was contagious. He raised the silent servant, Calovector Solemnus. But I was too clever for them. The power was between the dragons. They could stop the silent servant. Only the master could break the spell. But he's dead. Yet, the servant walks. Be forewarned. Once the word is given, it cannot be undone. It is always listening. Always listening. Calovector Solemnus. The servant will hear it nevermore, for the true master is dead, and the beast runs free.
It goes way longer than I think any one person's dialogue piece goes in any episode. It's quite the monologue.
I mean, I think it's pretty interesting though. Like I liked his little bit about the rainbow colored lights and then blackness, even if it didn't make any sense. I think it just added to his rambling incoherentness as a crazy farmhand that lost his mind and somehow is tied to the silent servant. But we haven't even gotten to that part yet. We're just talking about Jared and Ann.
Right, yeah. So as far as the voice of reason goes, I'll say she's more of a voice of reason than Jared, but Jared is almost written to be as dumb as a character can be written in a situation. So,
well, I have a few things to say about Jody and Mark once we get to them.
Well, for Jody and Mark, what do you have to say for the main characters for Goosebumps?
All right, so we start with Jody and Mark at the very beginning. You know, they get out and and we're introduced. They're the grandchildren of the episode, and they think they played the role well. You know, they definitely come off as two kids going to visit their grandparents. Mark, you know, is a little bit slow-witted sometimes. It would come off in the episode, but you know, what I like about Mark is he knows how to enjoy the simple things. He likes catch frogs and he likes chocolate chip pancakes. That's all you need to make Mark happy. And apparently baseball as well, which is a strange carryover from both episodes. I'm not sure why it's really there, other than baseball is a sport.
I guess it's what rural kids play because they have nothing better to do on the farmland.
Well, you got basketball, you got football. I don't know, but maybe baseball was like the hot thing that year. I don't remember that.
Yeah, I mean, what year did Field of Dreams come out? Because I know that was baseball themed and involved the cornfield.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I kept waiting for somebody to whisper, "If you build it,"
or Angels in the Outfield. Maybe.
Yeah, right. Angels in the Cornfield. the unreleased sequel.
That would have been a better episode. They at least would have gotten the things they wanted without some caveat.
Right.
Yeah, but both of them are both a little naive when it comes to things. As far as we go for just the actors themselves, you know, they're not the best of the Goosebumps acting cast, but I think that the sister does better than you know, the brother. But he's younger, so he has a lot to deal with. Now, Styx, who's not one of the main characters, he is a standout love of mine.
All right, rebuttals.
In terms of Jody and Mark, they didn't seem very remarkable to me. They just seemed like your run-of-the-mill Goosebumps kids who can't act very well. I particularly didn't find, I mean, both of them are pretty even to me in terms of like memorability and the way they express their dialogue when they're talking. Jody to me seemed a little more flat, but I think she was better at like physically acting than like reading her lines than Mark. Yeah, they do. I do see your point with like Mark being there to like appreciate the simple things like catching frogs and chocolate chip pancakes. I would want to do the same if I were in their situation. However, I find it kind of strange that, you know, they don't really get to do much of anything pertaining to those things. It's just mainly baseball. And then I remember both of them riding their bikes through the cornfield. Like a lot of the action here is just centered around the cornfield. And it's like they're waiting for something to happen. And it kind of felt a little dragging on for me with the pacing. Granted, I don't have any nostalgic tethers to this episode because I did not see it originally when I was younger. I, saw it recently. But I feel like they spent a long time just like talking in the cornfield, kind of trying to make sense of what's with all these scarecrows, and not really delving too much into a deeper plot and lore behind why they're there, what happens to them afterwards, and things mixed in with like why their grandparents and the farmhand Stanley's being so apprehensive. So, they're run-of-the-mill Goosebumps acting children, I'll give you that, but they just didn't stand out as much to me as like Jared and Anne. I feel like with Silent Servants, Jared and Anne have like a more clean cut like character development, because you see from the get-go that Jared's kind of selfish, he's impulsive, he's like adventurous, and then Anne's just like trying to hold him back, similar to how Tommy and Chucky play off of each other in Rugrats, where like Tommy wants to be the brave one who explores everything and doesn't care about the consequences, and Chucky's trying to be like, well, what about this? I don't think that's such a good idea. And you kind of need to have that back and forth interplay in order to like see where they compromise in terms of resolving the issue that brings up during the plot. So, in comparison to the two pairs of child character, I just think they have better character development throughout the story.
But yeah, so Anne and Mark and Jared and Jody, they all seem like they're pretty much written as the same kind of characters across the episodes, which is partially to me, and this gets into the theorizing space, the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode aired before the Goosebumps episode, but the Goosebumps book was written before the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode.
So it's like a chicken versus the egg situation, huh?
Exactly.
Who stole from who?
So if you go off the book, the characters have way more depth, and you're not limited by the acting, obviously, of the child actors, but you also get to hear inside their head more and get to know more about them and spend more time with them. And I think in the book, it obviously gives them more character development than the show had time to do. But they do a really good job. And this is something that Goosebumps, I think, always did a really good job of. Obviously, there's not a comparison for Are You Afraid of the Dark in this sense, but a lot of the episodes compared to the books were almost one-to-one in a lot of ways. It was very rare when they made a change to anything. And because of that, it made it feel like you could just hold the book up to the episode. And this is one of those books that, like, the episode, I have it right here with me right now. It's right here. It's
very nice. Let's see a close-up for our viewers. Ooh, perfect condition. It makes me weep inside when I gave away my entire Goosebumps book collection back in 2013 to a friend who was a elementary school teacher.
But back onto the topic.
Yeah, I know. We could geek out all day about this.
Yeah, so this is one of the episodes where it was really close to the book in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of the sacrifices they had to make to character development just came from the time constraints. There's a lot that happens, and there's a lot of places it happens in the book. So it just, like, for a tiny little episode that's going to play on Fox Kids, you have to consolidate. So I think the characters suffered from that, at least the main characters, because you spend the most time with them and therefore they got the most time cut. Yeah, the chase scene just kind of comes out of nowhere. And that's another thing where you're like, chicken versus the egg. Like, are the people directing this episode of Goosebumps taking inspiration from Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because there's a bike riding scene in that. It starts when you hold them up to each other, it gets a little bit creepy because you're like, these episodes really do get similar, but at the same time, there's a lot of reasons why that could be. But
maybe we should ask David Winning about that.
And I think that's why one of the reasons that the stories for Are You Afraid of the Dark in terms of a show are a little more, typically, not always, but a little more concise than the Goosebumps. Not any discredit to Goosebumps because they're fantastic, but Goosebumps were full preteen novels that they're having to condense to 20 minutes, whereas Are You Afraid of the Dark was written with that particular format in mind.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, exactly. Instead of condensing, they were working around those constraints to start with. But
affects the nature of the story a bit.
Yeah,
because to my knowledge, the only two tales of Are You Afraid of the Dark that got turned into novels when they tried to copy Goosebumps successes, The Tale of the Nightly Neighbors and The Tale of Cutter's Treasure. And even those, I feel like they enhanced the 30-minute stories that were on TV because they were able to flesh them out more. So I think it's just the nature of the medium where you have more space and time to kind of go into deeper, nuanced aspects of these characters than just what you're allowed to show in a TV programming block at the time.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
All right. Well, let's move on to supporting characters. And once again, we'll hand it over to Brett for Are You Afraid of the Dark?
So we have our supporting characters. We have quite a few in Silent Servant. Let's start with Anne's family. So we've got Pete Peterson, which is her father, who is also Flynn from The Tale of the Phantom Cab, played by Brian Dooley. We have Mark Peterson, which is Anne's older brother. He's kind of like lovable, but also follows his father's orders and enforcing the punishment for both of them. And we have Old Man Earlstead, who we see a glimpse of in the very first scene that we opened to 20 years before. He's like the farmhand nearby that has a connection to this Silent Servant Scarecrow because of like the talisman that he has that he uses. But we'll go more into that later when we reach the villain section. I just wanted to mention them for the sake of supporting characters. So in terms of their roles relative to the main characters, I would say Pete Peterson, the dad, is like the authoritative figure here. He like lays down the law with the kids after the front door window pane gets smashed by that baseball that Anne failed to catch. I would say he's stern, but he's also fair. He's not like unlikable. I had many teachers growing up who are very much like him, where they're friendly when you approach them, but if you cause trouble, they better discipline you for your misdeeds and make sure that you correct your behavior. He never seemed like overly bearing throughout that episode. He was just kind of there as like he just popped in here once in a while just to make sure the kids were in line. And same with Mark too. Like he's pretty fun. He's likable. He helped enforce the law, or basically the punishments that they dealt with. He likes baseball, just like the other Mark. He goes to a baseball game. He's a little more approachable, softer, kinder than his father, but he can be strict with his kids when necessary. And I think because he shares a mutual love of baseball with Jared, he's able to understand things from his point of view a little bit more, even if what he's telling him that's happening with all these different things around the homestead are going awry due to the Silent Servant Scarecrow. Also, can't forget Crazy George. I mean, I don't really consider him a villain. He's just kind of like a gray area character, and he's one of my favorites. Like, yeah, he fits the bill pretty well. He's wild, he's spontaneous, he's a little off-putting, but he definitely does a great job of reeling the audience in terms of like understanding the lore behind the Silent Servant, why they're created in the first place. They're essentially like scarecrows come to life to like do the farmhands bidding, do some chores so that they don't have to deal with it all the time. It seems that he has some sort of unknown connection to them. Like he used to somehow work with the scarecrows, back in 1970, whatever, when the episode opened up. And they don't really go into detail of that, but it's hinted that he had some sort of power over them, so that when we see him again at the end, reunite with the talisman connected to the scarecrow, it somehow like builds up feelings of tension. Like, oh shoot, what's he going to do now with that? Like he knows something we don't, that's going to like create more harm and destruction to this region wherever the story takes place. So I think he's a bit of a wild card in this episode, but I like him for his like very engaging, kind of bouncy performance that he's got going on. That's pretty much the main supporting characters that are worth noting.
All right, Jordy, any rebuttals for the supporting characters of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah, so I agree on most of your analysis of the characters. It seems pretty apt. Crazy George, though, I do disagree. I don't think he's on a good side. And it's hard to tell. You could say he's maybe chaotic neutral.
Yeah.
Because at the end, what's his intention? He's laughing maniacally. He's holding the weird dragon bone stick, which I feel like we get very little information of why there's the dragons on there. I feel like they're like an Eastern history behind this bone.
They're definitely like an Oriental style dragon, not European dragon on them. So makes you wonder the deeper story of how Old Man Earlstead came to hold on to this like talisman artifact where it's like two dragons facing each other on a weird bone with a scroll inside.
Yeah,
it.
it seems like
he
there's
got-
so much more of a story there.
He got it from that Chinese secondhand salesman on Gremlins.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that was the thing he sold before he sold Mogways. But yeah, I don't think he's good. He's possibly more bad. But he seems like he wants to help the kids, but I feel like that's a guilt thing. And I think that's what you kind of see at the beginning of the episode is he's so racked with guilt from what he's let take place so far that he's like, it has to stop here. Like, who knows what happened? Somebody died, assumedly. But it's like it took so long for him, and it could be because maybe he's like slower, or maybe, you know, because he's crazy, that he doesn't like come to a moral response quicker. But at the same time, why is he laughing maniacally at the end? That's just a little bit suspicious. Like, what are you about to do?
It's kind of like the Joker. He's very hard to predict. And I also find it interesting that he's only like present at Old Man Earlstead's farm. He doesn't leave that interior location at all. He's just there.
He's a ghost. He's the ghost.
Maybe. I don't really know. He raises more questions than answers in this story, but I think he's a very entertaining, appealing character in terms of like getting us to understand at least a little bit more of the magic behind the silent servant Scarecrow, and why that power has been passed down to him, or like just to act as a warning of if you misuse black magic, it's going to turn on you. Like, especially to Jared, because obviously he doesn't know what the heck he's doing with it. He's just having a ball as you would, because there are many kids who just don't understand how to use black magic properly in Are You Afraid of the Dark. Take Weeds from Super Specs, for example. I mean, he just throws that monkey bone dust powder everywhere. He can like cover a surface, and he just creates a lot of chaos after he leaves. So I think that's just due to I see you sprinkling it there, Alex, but at least you're being careful with it. You're not just like let's just get it in everyone's eyes or within like arm shot.
Achoo! Oh,
yeah, right.
Sorry to get smudged there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a given for Are You Afraid of the Dark kids. They're a little bit careless, but that helps advance the plot.
That's just, that's the love of also just those Nickelodeon shows in the early days, you know, just like people going for it.
Yeah,
you know, they go for it in the scenes. They were allowed to go for it, you know.
Definitely.
One take, throw it. That's how it goes. It got in someone's eyes. Oh well.
You got to push through it. The show must go on. You got to continue with that nervous twitch as there's like white powders all around your eye.
All right, Jordy, supporting characters.
All right. I mean, just on the Are You Afraid of the Dark supporting character rebuttals. As far as Mark goes, I agree. He's an awesome character. I think my favorite part about Mark, Silent Servant Mark, is that at first he comes off like he's really strict and mean.
Yeah.
But as the episode plays out, he becomes like more of like just a reasonable character, and you get like he's just like kind of like this older brother feeling, you know, instead of like an evil older brother, I guess, you know, or like a you know, brown nosing older sibling or something like that. He actually like goes to bat for them. You know, he tries to do what he can for them. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I kind of want him to be my older brother. I mean, I'm the firstborn in a family of 3, and I have a younger brother, but I like him a lot. I want to give him a hug.
But yeah, no, he's great. I love like the he's got a very like country feel to him, and I think he does the role well. I don't know if he's like from the South actually, but he has a very like Southern, like, I've been on a farm all day in the sun, so I have all this wisdom to give out to everybody else and can't just like say, oh, go do something. It's like, you have to do something because it's the right thing to do, and when the time comes you have to be the right man to do it. A very Uncle Ben type character almost.
Yeah,
I love that voice, Jordy.
I don't know if he talks like that, but I do like that voice too.
He doesn't really talk like that. I'm bad at voice impressions, if you can't tell.
It's all good. Points are trying.
Yeah, there's my those are my rebuttal on them. Yeah.
All right.
And then so Goosebumps. So we're going for the Goosebumps supporting characters. I think the Goosebumps supporting characters overall are a better cast than the Are You Afraid of the Dark supporting characters for Silent Servant. Brett may disagree with me here, but he'll have his time to do that.
I'm already building up the rage.
But this could be just my bias. I grew up with the book and this episode being like one of the standouts to me. It was one of the scarier of the series, and because of that, I think it stuck with me more as opposed to other episodes that are just kind of goofy. This is one that like kind of stoked the fear. Even in the book, it was like a scary, genuinely scary book, like up there with like Night of the Living Dummy. It wasn't like Horrorland where it just felt kind of like a goofy time. So, but because of that, the characters, I think they stuck with me and I kind of like it. This could be also like, I have family in the South. So I go out and visit out there, like Oklahoma. So, and it like captures that vibe perfectly of just like what it feels to like go visit, your grandparents out in the countryside. And like a lot of shows, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, everyone, Disney, they did like the country episode, where they go out to the country. Hey Arnold has its with
Arnold's cousin.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And like, yeah, it carries across, just like going out to the countryside on a trip, it's a typical 90s TV show plot. But anyways, because of that, it just kind of resonated with me. And the characters, like the grandparents, they are kind of not that noteworthy. I'll concede to that. They do have pretty great reactions at points when they have to act shocked or disconcerted with what's going on. Oh no, we won't do that, I guess, today.
Cherry, I don't get it. We always have apple. Yeah, it's Grandpa Kurt's favorite.
Cherry's my favorite.
Things like that.
If I may interrupt real quick, that line reminded me of It's a Good Life from Twilight Zone, which also deals with a cornfield. It's like the kid who like wishes people into the cornfield or does bad things to them if they think negative thoughts. And when they said that cherry pie thing, I was like, oh, it's just like that, where they have to think positive thoughts or else bad things are going to happen. Yeah. Like, oh, it's good you made a cherry pie. We hate apple, even though.
Yeah, that's a great connection. I've never thought about that till just now, but when you start to look at it more, there is more of a running theme there with like being trapped behind someone holding some magical power and keeping everyone to do their whim. So
and that looming threat can be more existential dread than you can imagine. Like bringing scarecrows to life itself is scary. Like any inanimate coming to life, that's going to build tension. But if you have like that kind of fear that just lingers in the back of your head, like that oh, you got to think this certain way, that really affects your reality. Ooh, that really drives it home much deeper.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. And then I guess so for the other supporting characters, we have Styx, and I'm finally happy I can talk about Styx. Styx is the standout character of this episode and the standout character of the book. His attitude and his like borderline psychopathic way he starts off until he turns around by the end of the episode to be the most empathetic person on the entire farm, where it's like, okay, like he's a lot more complex character than any other character in the episode. And he's not the main character. He's just their cousin. But I don't know if when they were writing this, R.L. Stine writing this or someone else writing this for the episode itself, because it's in both the book, but also in the episode, he's a little bit different. He's more aggressive in the book, way more aggressive in the book with his pranks and stuff like that. But in the episode, he's a lot more chill with the pranks. He just like kicks a scarecrow into her, jumps out. And a lot of his beginning aggression, as you go through the episode, you realize he's just trying to scare them away from what's actually going on. And also maybe it's him trying to cope with what's going on the farm. He is the only kid there, and it's his dad responsible for what's going on. And because of that, he probably feels some level of guilt for what's happening, but no power to really change it. Or he could, but he also feels bad for his dad because his dad doesn't have that much and hasn't had that much. And that brings us, to talking about Stanley, who's, he's a tragic character, I suppose, who just wanted to have his one day as, king, or his day on top where he got to have things his way. He wanted cherry pie. And from how it sounds, seems like he wasn't getting, a fair rub of things before, like nobody was considering how Stanley felt about things. He was just told to do the work. And although he's like a little bit crazy, the things that initially sound crazy, much like I guess Crazy George, aren't actually crazy things. They're like true statements that just sound crazy because of how crazy the situation is.
Right. Or they're worded funny where they might not seem right.
Yeah. When you're saying like the rainbows and the dragons, like that makes no sense until you're like, oh, because he's talking about this thing that has dragons on it and the lights that shoot out. Like, oh, that's actually really relevant, not crazy at all. He was just warning you about a crazy thing that could happen. And then, so with Stanley, it seems like he knows what's going on. Like he knows that things have gone too far, but he's afraid to admit it because he's afraid things will go back to the way they were before and nobody considered him and nobody thought about how things were for him. So he's holding on to it in an attempt to try to keep things good for himself. And the true evil really lies with the Scarecrows themselves and not with Stanley's intention. And that's even in the end of the episode, which, twist ending because it's Goosebumps and you have to have a twist ending if it's a Goosebumps episode. He just picks up a piece of paper and starts reading it. He doesn't mean to do what he's doing, but because he's a little bit slower and a little bit simple, he like doesn't know that maybe this piece of paper on the floor has to do with like these magical words that get read out loud or just read in general and summon something. So then, he accidentally brings the Scarecrow back, but nowhere near like how Crazy George intentionally seems like he has some miscontent or some bad thing he wants to do. I don't know why else he would be giggling in such a way, but yeah. So that would be, that's my character analysis for the supporting characters. There's really no one else there on the farm. So that's it.
I do find some interesting parallels between Stanley, Styx, Crazy George, and Old Man Earlstead. Like they kind of swapped little bits of personalities with each other in terms of similarities there. I think Stanley and Crazy George have some similarities, oddly enough, like because they're typecast as the character that you shouldn't believe what they're doing because they're dealing with magic and no one really has proof of what they're doing with these scarecrows, yet we need to pay attention to them the most because they're driving the plot with their actions more than anyone else. I also see a little bit of Stanley's character bleeding into Jared's because he's the one who read the scroll from the talisman in Silent Servant. And Stanley was the one who read all the spells on the spellbook pages, both in the book and that separate page. So they're the ones who are firsthand dealing with the magic and conjuring all these characters. So, they have that connection there. I think Styx is definitely the most interesting character of the supporting characters. I see him mainly, I don't see him as complex as you do, but maybe because I'm not as familiar with the episode. I think he's just kind of like doing something similar as Crazy George, where he's scaring the kids away to like warn them, but at the same time, he knows what's going on and he's not really doing more to like make it clear to them that they should be, afraid or at least be able to handle these scarecrows that come to life that are coming after them at midnight. So I'm not really convinced that Styx's role here is as important as it seems because he does get a lot of screen time compared to the main characters. In terms of the grandparents, they're kind of like background supporting characters. They don't really do much other than kind of establish the situation here where things are different than when Jody and Mark were last at the farm, and they have to like be good or else something bad's going to happen, mainly because they're aware that Stanley's dealing with this black magic books that he found. And, these scarecrows are coming to life. And because he has the power now to like overpower the grandparents who run the farm, they have to be on their best behavior. Hence, like, cherry pie because it's Stanley's favorite, not apple pie because it's what we normally serve. So X-nay in the open say, or else you're going to get your butt kicked by a couple of scarecrows there.
Well, then let's move on to villains.
My favorite part. So I would say the role of villain is split between master and slave here. Old Man Earlstead and the Silent Servant Scarecrow. We don't know too much about the dead farmer other than Anne heard legends of him using magic to order invisible servants to tend to his farm when he was alive 20 years ago, around 1974, before present day in this episode. I would say, like, this is a little bit unusual, but I would say Jared's like a tad bit of the villain as well, just because he's maliciously, well, maybe not maliciously, but he's definitely using dark magic in a way that's careless and creating a lot of chaos on the farm. But I would consider like the Silent Servant to be the focus, mainly because he's this very mysterious looking scarecrow that's kind of horrifying to look at in like an uncanny valley way. Like compared to the Goosebumps scarecrows, who seem more fantastical in their design, with like the rubber mask and the like exaggerated features on their face that look like, you know, on rubber masks, and you know their limbs are all over the place and filled with straw. This is more like a human figure based scarecrow, with hollowed out eyes. He's got a burlap sack for his head, you know, very thick sun hat and like long earth tone coat and pants. And he always used to creep me out as a kid. Like I never liked the way that he looked, particularly like when we just saw him on the farm during daytime. But when he scared me the most when I first watched the episode was when he like was standing up like this behind the kids when they were taking out the trash at night, and you can just hear his like breath, like, ah.
You don't think all that Silent Servant stuff is real? I wish. I'm sick of doing chores. Mark?
Like he's alive and he's going to do something to you. And then when he like is about to like essentially throttle Anne's father's neck as he's like trying to fix the tractor when it breaks down. He's very imposing without doing much on screen. Like I feel like he's definitely working the minimalist angle here, where less is more. And similar to how like a lot of people think Zebo is very frightening, isn't necessarily due to the fact that, you know, he looks scary, because, you know, the dummy does, I agree. And even like his ghost that we see briefly in the episode is scary, but it really does more to play to the viewer's imagination of what he could do, or what you imagine him doing when we don't see him. Like for most of the episode, when he's carrying out Jared's chores, like building the dugouts, helping them build the fence, stuff like that, he's not present on screen. He's like off somewhere else, so you know he's like up to no good, even though we don't see him. But he doesn't move, so it makes you wonder, well, is he really doing something or not? And it just makes you think of like what this scarecrow is really capable of. Maybe he has a little bit of a higher order thinking and a sense of strategy going on in his head when he's carrying out these orders, and just not, you know, keeping his cards close to his chest, so to speak, when, you know, he fills his commands.
If I only had a brain.
Yeah, right. I definitely thought of the Scarecrow from Wizard of Oz when going over this episode, as well as Scarecrow from Batman the Animated Series, but he's way more talkative.
I got Jeepers Creepers, a lot of Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it comes down to those hollow eyes and like just how they blankly stare at you, and you know he's like gonna force his way into, you know, your personal space, no matter what he has to do, because he has to fulfill a command. He's not going to not do it. He has to. And yeah. I think it's that relentlessness and that like just stoic sentience that really gets to me, versus like the scarecrows in Goosebumps, where they're just like, essentially straw zombies coming at you.
All right. Any rebuttals from you, Jordy?
All right. So my rebuttals, I agree with Brett that I think that they achieved like a cool uncanny valley effect with the Silent Servant face. I think there's this like, it's got enough of a normal human face shape to where it just feels like this is cloth put over a regular face. So it kind of makes you think like there's a face beneath it, or some sort of like mummy-like, or like some human face behind it. Whereas when you compare it to like the Goosebumps, they're more rounded and almost cartoon-esque. So you don't think there's like a head behind it as much as it is just like straw filled in, you know, on the inside. With the Silent Servant, it almost seems like there's like life bestowed inside of it when it comes to life, and like a figure actually fills inside of it. It's not just straw there anymore. But I don't think and this may be a hot take, but I don't think the Silent Servant is evil. I don't think it's a villain. You could argue that in those last moments when the Silent Servant flashes to the like old farm, that there's like 2 seconds where he's running towards the kids because they're breaking that totem, the stick with the dragon.
Yeah.
But you could also equally see that as him trying to preserve his own life or their own life, right? They only have life due to this. And if someone was about to end your life, would you not try to defend that life? You would. So is the Silent Servant bad? I don't think so. The Silent Servant only does what anyone asks them to do. It's more of a monkey paw situation, I suppose, of like, or not monkey paw, but a genie type situation where you have to be careful what you wish for and be specific, because if you're too general, then it's left up to interpretation.
Right. And that's why I threw in the side that Jared is the true villain, because he's the one who's doing the bidding and the careless black magic commands. So really it's just his lust for power and desire that taints the Silent Servant to be evil based, by extension.
Yeah. Jared is definitely, I think, the closest to a villain, if not the old man Earlstead, but he's not really part of the story. He's just there in parts in the beginning. He doesn't really feed into like the main theme of the story as much. Yeah, I can't see the Silent Servant as evil unless you're trying to consider that last few seconds where he tries to go after the kids, but I don't think that's unwarranted either, because that's how he stays alive. He was just teleported there, which is strange that breaking it teleports them nearer to you, and then you have to do something else to destroy them. But I guess that's how that works. And if there is teleportation, why doesn't the Silent Servant just teleport where they want to go instead of like walking really, really long for a really long period of time to get to do the task that you've been assigned to?
Oh, they should hop in a tractor, which actually happens in your tale.
Exactly. Yeah, and so then that brings you to the Goosebumps Scarecrows, where it's like, now those are villains. They're without a doubt the villain of the series. And I think, maybe with this is what's weird. And I think if you compare the two episodes, you see like Silent Servant picks up at the beginning of like the inciting incident of the Scarecrows being brought to the farm, where Scarecrow walks at midnight. This has already been happening for a week or two since, the kids got there. And because of that, this has been going on for longer, and the Scarecrows have had more time to kind of take over. And, so maybe if the Silent Servant was around for another week, we would have seen a similar situation. So Scarecrow walks at midnight. But because it got taken care of so quickly in Silent Servant, you can never really compare it, I guess. But when it gets to just the actions of the Scarecrows, the Goosebumps Scarecrows are like actively trying to destroy them. Like every night they have to lock the house because the Scarecrows wake up and try to break their way in. And they're not like light about it either. And this is what scared me as a kid about it. Like they were very aggressive about the way they like pound on the windows. And they're almost like super strong in these weird ways where like they can like break through walls when they break through the farm walls at the end. And now, given when they actually get a hold of somebody, they seem to do absolutely nothing. They just hold somebody.
Yeah, their display of power fluctuates wildly. It goes from like, I'm an unstoppable Hulk, to like, oh, there goes my head again. There goes my arm. They just flicked it off when we closed the door.
Yeah. So their powers kind of adjust to the situation. The vicinity closeness, I think, to the main characters is what dampens their ability to do anything.
Either that or the spell is unstable.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's not the spell, it's the conjurer.
It's the conjurer. Yeah, that could be. Stanley isn't the best at reading, as we all know. So
yeah.
But
he has to enunciate and project better.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but Stanley, I don't think you could consider him a villain. I think he's just trying to have his one day in the sun, but he's not getting it. And now that he does have it, it's hard to let it go, as well as like, he's sort of afraid of the Scarecrows too. He doesn't know what kind of retaliation will come. They talk about it in the episode, how it's gotten harder and harder to control them. And so like it started off like Silent Servant probably, where it was easy and they just did what you said and went back to sleep. But a week later, they had a bunch of friends now and they don't listen to the rules as much. And it seems like more of just a general casting spell where you just like bring them alive and then you tell them what to do, as opposed to like Silent Servant where you have to give the instruction in order to like make them do anything before they get up. So yeah, maybe the magic system in Goosebumps wasn't thought through well enough for people to actually conduct their sorcery. Yeah, there's no other villains there though. I mean, the grandparents, you could say they're villains. Like, tell your grandkids not to come visit. Jesus, like
what a twist.
That's not that hard. Just reschedule maybe, but like, no, this has to happen. This has to happen now while we have scarecrows overtaking the farm.
It's good that it happens. It's real good.
All right, Brett, any rebuttals from you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you said it yourself. That's one thing that really bugged me about the scarecrows, in addition to like their rubber mask faces and their just, I don't know, their bodies didn't seem as fleshed out as the Silent Servant scarecrow to me. Sure, there's more in number and they may seem more imposing with like how they smash through windows and barn doors, but again, their power fluctuates. It's just like, what are you dealing with? I can easily punch that guy's head off and dismember him if I really wanted to, like if I stood up for a fight instead of run away. They don't seem very effective either. Like, as you mentioned before, the magic is more like generalized. So it's just, they come to life and then they just kind of go on autopilot zombie mode to like seek out their victims. And I don't know, just hold on to them until they decide to break away. So that didn't hold water for me versus like Silent Servant. Somehow like the clarity of the magic is very clear. It's spelled out. Like there's a specific spell, Calavector Solemnos, and the rest of the words that they say to enter the command. So you kind of get a deeper, more enriched sense of how the magic works in that sense, and how it's like very specific to that scarecrow, and he carries out the deed. I do think it's interesting how it takes the orders, because it's a little bit gray area there in terms of like, Jared saying, I command you, build me a dugout. And then he says like, I like to kill whoever took my glove. And then he takes that as a command and runs off with it. So it has a little bit of a gray area there with the magic, but I think still the Silent Servant is more imposing and threatening, because he'll do anything that he's commanded to do. Like, go ahead.
They do also say earlier in the episode, be careful what you say, because they're always listening.
Always listening. Yeah. And that adds to that existential dread kind of sense. Like, you don't know if they're listening right now. And if you slip up or say something figuratively, they'll take it as literal. You want me to kill your friend? I'll go kill him. Try and stop me. And you can't, because we don't know how powerful this guy is or what he's capable of, because a lot of his like fearful demeanor comes from the unknown, what we don't see, rather than what we see in terms of how he affects the other characters.
Yeah, I think these Goosebumps scarecrows aren't really as much of a like hidden horror. Theirs is very forward, like they'll attack you.
Kind of like jump scare horror versus like thriller or suspense horror.
Yeah. So in that sense, I think the Scarecrow and like Silent Servant, like, or at least the magic behind the Silent Servant, is more intriguing and more well written out, because it makes you ask questions like, or at least it seems like there's more thought put into it, because of like the stick with the dragons and like, what's the history behind that, and how did Earlstead get a hold of it,
right?
And who else had it before them, and like they're always listening, which means they don't exist inside of the scarecrows. They exist in like the space around us, and they just possess the scarecrows to do.
And we also know there's more than one, because Anne says in the legend that there were several servants doing Old Man Earlstead's bidding. So in a sense, he's very similar to Stanley, where he just wants to lighten the load of his farm chores burden. By having multiple of them just kind of tend to the fields or do whatever. So there are more parallels there. But again, because we don't see that, it leaves more to the imagination of what it'd be like if more similar Silent Servants were doing that, or if they started attacking more people, so they had to start locking them up in stables in the farm because they just became too powerful or like able to act on their own without commands, which I think is more scary. Like once you lose control of something, it's hard to regain that control unless you find drastic measures to stop them. And like with what Anne and Jared did, they had to like break the talisman and, repeat a certain spell of the scroll that was in it to stop him dead in his tracks.
Yeah, it's just more thought through, I think, in general for the magic system on the other one. But the spells in the book also for Goosebumps don't really they never explain what spell does what. It just seems like read off random words. I believe in the book there is like a more specified spell for like these awakening them, and then you use other spells to tell them to do other stuff. But I think if you just wake them up, they just go out and just, start to wreak havoc. Or the more you wake them up, the more alive they become until you don't have any control really over them.
Yeah.
Which is how it plays out in the book. That's not really translated in the episode as well. I mean, Styx kind of alludes to it when he's telling Mark and Judy what's going on, but there's just not enough time, I think, for them to really get across it. Also, you have your typical Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark juxtaposition where they were accomplishing different goals as TV shows. And I think, like everyone always says, they're competitors in a lot of ways, or at least they were competition for each other. But for people that are fans of them, we don't see them as the same show at all. Goosebumps is like big action-packed explosions, I guess you would say, whereas Are You Afraid of the Dark is more about the story behind why things are happening the way they are. So it's just and that's what you get when you get your villains in those types of settings. Like Goosebumps villains are more about being brutal and breaking things and being menacing and scary out on the outside and not really holding any substance when they get up next to you, other than maybe saying they might hurt you. But Are You Afraid of the Dark brought up existential dread and stuff like that of
deeper undercurrents of horror and seriousness that wasn't really present in the overt display of cartoony-ish horror in Goosebumps.
Yeah, exactly. Are You Afraid of the Dark was trying to communicate you need to be careful about what you ask for, and you need to think about what comes out of your mouth because it could make things happen differently for different situations. Whereas Goosebumps didn't really have a lesson other than
stay away from the scarecrows.
Yeah, exactly. Don't mess with magical scarecrows because just don't. I guess that could turn bad.
Well, going along with story, that is our next category. So, Brett, why don't you take it over for story?
All right. Well, we did touch upon it a little bit before, but I'll go slightly more into detail here. Stories like this rarely happen, if ever, in the Are You Afraid of the Dark universe. As far as I'm aware, this is the only Scarecrow-themed episode of all 91 episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark. Some do typically take place in rural settings or even mix magic with such locations or barns, like, for example, The Tale of the Hungry Hounds or The Tale of the Mystical Mirror. But no other utilizes magic in a way to bring an inanimate object to life to be controlled by another character, specifically one that resembles a human figure. It's proving to be uniqueness relevant to Betty Ann's moral pertaining to do the right thing or stay silent. But I think that has more to do with Jared's control and understanding of controlling the silent servant than the silent servant himself. We basically see Anne and Jared playing baseball in the front of their yard when the story starts, after we get a little prelude where old man Earlstead's trying to calm down the silent servant who's locked away in the stable in the barn. And then he's scolding Crazy George for, I guess, maybe going a little too haywire with use of the magic, similar to maybe how Stanley would use the magic for his own personal personal gain, I guess, or just easing burdens. Then once the baseball breaks the window pane, that's the inciting incident. Then we have to focus on how the two main protagonists are going to fix that window or make up for the misdeed. And that's where we get Silent Servant as a shortcut solution instead of just doing chores and getting it paid off somehow, where it's an opportunity for Jared to essentially just get it done and over with, take no responsibility for his actions, and then, just go on with his life playing baseball, learning no lessons. But as we find out, sometimes the shortcut isn't the best route to the solution because once he has control of the silent servant, he starts to liken to the idea that he has influence or power over another force, and it bends to his whim. So once he reads the scroll that he finds within like that talisman bone thing in the farm when Anne and Jared deliver beans, I think to Mr. Galloway, they happen upon that old barn where Old Man Earlstead was 20 years ago. He's now deceased. His tombstone's there. When they look inside, the inanimate silent servant falls on them, and then Crazy George pops out, I guess, from a hay bale nearby to warn them. Jared just disregards what he says. He's like, Crazy George is crazy. What's your excuse? When he's like talking to Anne about using the silent servant, and then they get the idea to prop him up in the garden from Mark, actually, the older brother, because he said it like keep the animals away from the garden that they're like building a fence for. So, Jared, being the lazy 90s kid who just wants to play baseball, commands the silent servant just to test out the magic, to finish the fence for them that they're building around the garden. They build it. It looks great. Mark's impressed. Mr. Peterson's impressed. They're willing to give him some like time off for doing that because they think they did a good job and put in some hard work. But really, Jared's just like, yeah, I'll take credit for this thing that I didn't do that may have happened due to the Scarecrow. And as he's like thinking about it, he's like, ooh, I can get him to do more things if this is what he actually did. So, he tests the limits of his power a little bit more by asking him to build a dugout. And when the silent servant fulfills that wish, the dugout looks great, but then Anne questions, well, where did the wood come from? Because it looks a lot like the yellow painted picket fence wood that we saw somewhere else. And a scene later when Mark is like yelling at them to get over here, it looks like the fence is trashed. So it's one of those moments where it's like, be careful what you wish for, just might get at. This is the negative downside of like what you asked for that you didn't, look ahead to see. So, we see that there's consequences to using magic in this way, but Jared's still undeterred by fulfilling his own desires with it. And then, when his glove is taken away, way back in the beginning for breaking the window, Mark ends up grounding them. And then because of all the mishaps that are happening due to the silent servants, he ends up giving the glove back to them before he goes to his baseball game at night. And then, Jared's so upset that he ended up getting tractor parts in the rucksack instead of his baseball glove that he immediately like just snaps and says, I'd like to kill whoever stole my baseball glove. And then you hear like thunder and lightning and horses howling, whatever. And it's just like, you didn't think he'd hear that, did you? And then sure enough, the silent servant's off to go run errands and kill his father because, he, by coincidence, he happened to have the baseball gloves in his other rucksack that looked like that instead of tractor parts. So then, knowing what happened and the gravity of, giving commands carelessly like that, Anne and Jared go run to catch up with Mark to make sure to find out where her father is so that they can stop the Scarecrow or at least figure out where the gloves are. And, once more of that information is revealed, they go back to the talisman. They try to break it, but it doesn't break it first. But then they go to the farm where Old Man Earlstead is, and they said, we got to do it right because magic is about doing it right. And so they break the talisman in half over Old Man Earlstead's tombstone, I guess because he's the original owner of that artifact or somehow has like some residual root connection to the silent servant that way. Weakens the magic, teleports the silent servant from moments from like strangling Mr. Peterson back to the barn where this whole fiasco began. And then through Anne like declaring the magic spell, we have this very weird like strobe flashback sequence where like the silent servant is like recalling all these things that happen when he gains sentience, and he's just like essentially having a short fuse, and he melts like the Wicked Witch of the West from Wizard of Oz right in front of them, complete with smoke coming out of his smushed face. So after that happens, essentially everything goes back to normal. Jared's not going to mess with magic anymore. They're going to tell Mark all about the story of what happened with the Scarecrow that came to life. And then out of nowhere, Crazy George shows up, thunder and lightning again in the background, puts the two dragon pieces together. He's like, and then it's just the end. We don't know what happens. We don't know what he has in mind to do other than bring the Scarecrow back to life, or somehow conjure more scarecrows with it, or even do something worse. It's the end question mark. And I think that does a great job of building suspense and leaving you with that sense of dread that like other Are You Afraid of the Dark tales, such as Pinball Wizard or Super Specs, would lead you with, where things don't go well. It doesn't get wrapped up pretty in a bow and then we can go home and sleep soundly at night. There's still evil afoot and you don't know what's going to happen, and that lingers with you. And that's why this is a memorable episode for me. And because it stuck with me, I still come back to it time and time again. And it's also one of my sister's favorites. She used to watch the show with me as well.
Jordy, any rebuttals from you?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the story. But yeah, at the end, it's a question of whether or not he's going to do it, if he's going to do something with the scarecrows, or I mean, obviously, it seems like he's going to do something with the scarecrows. I don't know what else they could be doing with the scarecrows, or why they'd be laughing.
Do my laundry.
Yeah, I know. But you think after like all that's happened and your already previous warnings and your already previous experience that you wouldn't be so eager to get back into this mess. But I guess, that's being crazy for you. So,
I mean, at least Jared didn't put it back together. I think he learned his lessons, but Crazy George, he's just like lusting for power at this point. Just exploring all the possibilities of what he could do with the Silent Servant.
Or get into theory territory. He's waiting for the next person to take on. That could be this thing all along. Maybe Crazy George is like just part of the...
He orchestrates it.
Yeah. He got, everybody involved. He's always there every time it's brought up, even a long time ago. So...
yeah.
Maybe he is secretly behind it, just kind of like how Sardo might secretly be a genie and not know it.
Right. I mean, it was hinted at in the Tale of the Time Trap when he wished for a million more wishes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's never concretely said, and it's never brought up ever again, really. But then, weird stuff, right? But yeah, so in theory territory, I mean, that's definitely possible. I agree with you also that it's cool to see one of the few episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark where it ends on a negative note, or kind of a twist, as opposed to like resolving and having the lesson learned.
Yeah, it's very different from Goosebumps in the sense that you don't expect the twist or a downer ending to happen because they're so few and far between. I think I counted among the 91 episodes when I did research for my book that there are around 11 or 12 of them. So they definitely rely on the less is more approach and use them sparsely to really drive the point home with the story that if you do this bad thing, it's not going to end well, literally.
Yeah, sometimes unsparingly, like when it was a Pinball Wizard. Like, what was the real crime here? Like playing a pinball machine? Like,
being an addict? Stealing money from a homeless person?
Yes. Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, though, definitely just normal twist ending. It's actually one of the scarier ones, I think, because it's like, how are they going to get out of it? A giant thresher coming towards your house, but I guess that should lead me into talking about the full story. So I'll go ahead and start on the full story. Okay. Starting off, I'd say that Goosebumps, just the overall episode Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, is one of the scariest episodes of the series. And that's saying a lot because Goosebumps gets pretty scary sometimes, at least for kids in the 90s at the time, with the effects for the time.
you need all those caveats because... Many of them I was watching now, I'm like, really? They didn't quite hit as hard as I remember them hitting.
Exactly. If it weren't for me having been a kid watching it and like literally like not being able to watch episodes without like doing like this sometimes.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have like ever have seen it for what it was back in the day. It's like there's this goofy mask that I can see like the seam line on. Why would anyone be scared of that? It's like, well, when you're a kid and your TV
you don't see
has
that
terrible quality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, it's it just stands up there as one of the scarier episodes. And then just like a little side note before I go into the full description, on the cover with the face, like this is like the standout face. Like to me, this is the Scarecrow that I thought about when I read the book Coming to Attack, not the Scarecrow that you see in the episode.
Yeah, I prefer the book version.
Yeah. Book version's way creepier. He's got sticks for hands. Like, how's that play out when he's attacking you? It's probably very creepy.
And sharp.
Yeah, and sharp and pointy. As opposed to normal work gloves. But
right.
but yeah, but I love the adaptation that they did for the Scarecrow. They did their best to try to pull that like Tim Jacobus face that he did with the airbrush design and like pulling that into the show. And they did that a lot with the characters, and I appreciate that. Like they went the extra mile. And it also eventually is what got the show to end because it cost way too much money for them to make the show.
Because of the Scarecrow costumes?
Not just the Scarecrow, the creature costumes in general on Goosebumps. Yeah, they had to deal out a big chunk of their budget every episode to those costumes, and because they wanted to do justice to the monsters.
I mean, a lot of them look great. Some of them were even better than what was depicted in the book cover art, like Haunted Mask, for example. Like everyone remembers the TV image of Carly Beth wearing that green hideous mask versus like the more generic green face on the cover.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so Tim Jacob is great art being mixed with the show. Creators' awesome ability to adapt that. I mean, it was a Canadian FX studio. I'm gonna like hit myself for not remembering the name, but I don't remember it right now. But they're a Canadian FX studio. They're still around today, I believe. I think they're Vancouver.
That's what Alex is for. He looks up stuff for us we can't remember.
I'm doing it right now.
So we start off with Jody, played by Heather Bertram, and her brother Mark, played by John Campbell. They arrive at their grandparents' farm, get that typical Goosebumps, acoustic, strummy, everything's great right now, but it won't be later song as the car pulls up to their grandparents' house from the airport. Now in the book, it actually starts with them being picked up at the airport, and the weirdness starts on the ride home, but the episode decides just to pick up with them arriving. It's not that much that happens. But yeah, so they get taken to their grandparents' house by Stanley, who is the farmhand on their grandparents' farm. And he helps, do what farmhands do. And he lives there with his son, Styx, who's also a farmhand in training, a farmhand's apprentice.
He's there.
Yeah, he's there. He's around. His dad, Stanley. And then the grandparents. The grandparents are pretty much typical grandparents that you would see in any Goosebumps fair. They're like, "Oh, my grandkids! Oh, here you are. You've grown up. You're older. That happens." And Mark and Jody get excited about doing all the things that they do every year at their grandparents' farm, which is like catching frogs, chocolate chip pancakes, maybe driving the thresher. Nothing about baseball, but they decide to play baseball anyways. But so they want to go get an early start on catching frogs, but this is when their grandparents tell them that, it's probably not a good idea because Stanley expresses that he doesn't like when people catch frogs. And so leave the frogs alone. But anyways, they're like, oh, well, at least we have other things to look forward to. Chocolate chip pancakes and the like. So the grandparents pull them on in, and their first night's kind of a bust, and they're chilling up in their the guest room at their grandparents' house, and they're kind of just thinking about how they haven't yet got a good start at all the things they were so excited to do. And while they're talking about that, Mark's looking out the window, and he starts to notice the Scarecrow's moving, and gets kind of nervous about it. But he decides that even if they can't get frogs, that it's okay because tomorrow morning they're going to get chocolate chip pancakes. So they both kind of his sister doesn't really get that much to say other than being like, oh yeah, well, that's just tomorrow things will be better. And so cuts to the next day. And this is one of those great Goosebumps moments again, where it's everything's great. It's like a Folgers commercial. They come running down the stairs. super excited for their chocolate chip pancakes, which Mark is extra excited about.
I mean, I'm pretty excited about them now. You're making me hungry.
Yeah, I know. That was the thing of the book. It always made me like hungry for chocolate chip pancakes while I was reading it. I was like, oh, now I want chocolate chip pancakes. But yeah. They run downstairs excited for the chocolate chip pancakes, but nope, no chocolate chip pancakes because Stanley doesn't like chocolate chip pancakes, so they just get boring old breakfast. And
Cornflakes, I believe.
Yeah, it's like cornflakes or generic corn flake cereal, corn crisp or something.
They probably had to make it straight from the corn cobs in the field.
Exactly. They just eat cream corn for breakfast. That would
yeah, no thanks. Cream corn again. Well, what do you expect? We live on a cornfield farm.
But yeah, I guess Stanley grew up loving corn, so corn flakes is his number one breakfast choice. He knows how to get a good start. He knows how to earn his stripes. So he is like demands the corn flakes. So they're having corn flakes. And Mark and Judy are bummed again that they don't get to do another one of the things they were looking forward to. So they head outside and they decide to start, throwing the baseball around. And while they're throwing the baseball, Mark throws it super freaking far. I don't even know why he would throw it that far. She's not there, so I don't know why he's throwing it that far. So he throws it into the cornfield. Jody's out getting the ball, and literally 0.5 seconds into looking the ball, Mark's like, Joe, are you found it? Have you found it yet? Where is it? Have you found it yet? Okay, she's looked for 1 second. Maybe give her literally 1 second. You're the one that decided to throw it into the cornfield.
Maybe if you gave her a map, she could find it. I mean, we're looking at 200 acres here. It all looks the same.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of parallels to the Are You Afraid of the Dark, characters more angry upsetness. Or just being kind of a jerk, but
and also throwing baseballs way farther than they should be thrown.
What is this? Terrible aim, and you're the one that likes baseball. What's up with you?
Yeah, pick a new sport.
So yeah, they throw it around, and that's where they get their first instance of hearing creepy noises in the cornfield, and it's about that time where they run into Stanley, and Stanley tells them that he made the Scarecrows walk, and Stanley, are you confused again? Which is this funny running thing to they don't want to call him crazy, so they just say he's confused. Yeah, it's a very weird way of saying crazy, but they always call him confused instead. So they're like, "Oh, are you confused, Stanley?" He's like, "No, I'm not confused. I made him walk, and I can make him walk again." And that starts to creep them out and make them feel unsettled by what he's saying. But I mean, I guess that's typical for his confusion to them. So they kind of brush it off and go back inside. And then that's when we get to nightly ritual of the Scarecrows coming and attacking the house. They start to notice that they're outside, banging on the outsides, trying to get, well, not yet do they notice they're banging on the outside. They just notice them moving outside. And they brush it off as just the wind. But Mark is a little bit more convinced. I mean, you can kind of see them lifting their head. And this is one of the things I think they did a good job of in the episode is when the Scarecrows are supposed to be alive, they had somebody in it, and they moved around. And when they weren't supposed to be alive, they had a dummy instead, usually. And because of that, it gave it this life drained out kind of effect of they have life one moment, they don't have it the next moment. And it was a little bit more, I think, convincing to see them as actual scarecrows that were coming alive rather than a guy dressed up as a scarecrow laying down, which sometimes you can tell. Yeah, so moving forward, they go towards the next day and they're playing catch again or riding bikes around. And that's when Jody is attacked by a scarecrow while riding the bike. And this is pretty intense too. It's for action scenes in a kid's show. This guy straight up dive tackles. I don't know if it's actually a little girl he dive tackles, but whoever the shorter stunt person is that gets dive tackled off of a bike really commits to the stunt role because that scarecrow comes straight out of the cornfield like lightning. And this is one of those instances of the scarecrow's inconsistent power ratio of They come in hot with like a dive tackle and take you off your bike, and then they just lay limp and don't do anything, I guess, once Stanley walks up. So I guess maybe it's because Stanley's around that, you know.
It's like a Scarecrow on-off switch. It's like, oh, someone saw me using Scarecrow again. Click.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so you guys are going to break in and then just shut down? Like, I don't understand what is the prerogative with the Scarecrow sometime. But yeah, so the Scarecrow instantly kind of goes limp after the intense dive tackle. And you could say that that's because Stanley shows up like right after, and maybe because it fears Stanley because of the book that he holds. It doesn't want to like anger him in front of him. They haven't gotten to that level of control over themselves yet. So, or maybe Stanley called them off. We can't tell because we don't see what happens from his side before it happens. We just see him walk up. But they're pretty convinced that it's Styx that's doing all of this. And I think Styx kind of like wanted them to think that, so he kind of like in the beginning kind of led them to believe that by like playing around with the Scarecrow around them to kind of magicians lead their attention somewhere else instead of like to what the actual source of what's going on is.
Yeah, sleight of hand.
Second guess what was going on as just him conducting pranks. And it works. They keep thinking it's just him running pranks. But eventually, after it's gotten so intense, like with the dive tackle on the bike, it becomes obvious that like things are getting worse and worse at the farm. And that leads to later that night when the Scarecrows are finally attacking. They attack the farm. Jody, Mark, and Styx decide that they need to... Well, finally, Styx reveals what's going on the farm. We get the full reveal that Stanley has made some sort of magical pact with his book or summoned scarecrows with the book just to have things his way for a little while on the farm because he never got things to have his way. And as Styx explains, like Stanley never really got much of anything in life. He's been poor. He didn't get a fair chance of it because he's a little bit slower than everybody else. And he's not as capable maybe of taking on like larger roles and stuff, but he does the best he can and he works hard. But he doesn't feel like he's getting the appreciation that he deserves for how much hard work he does. So he uses the scarecrows, and it's never explained how he got his hands on this book really, but at least in the episode. And so he has this book and he uses it to his advantage to give himself just a little bit of time in the spotlight, like Styx explains. But it's gotten out of control, and he's afraid that his dad no longer has control over the scarecrows, and everything's gotten out of hand. And they've kind of gotten to this point where like it's gotten worse every night, and they have to like lock themselves up in their houses to avoid the scarecrows because the scarecrows are most powerful at nighttime. Which they don't only come alive at night; they're just most powerful at nighttime, which is maybe a misleading title. The Scarecrow walks at midnight because it dive tackles during the daytime.
Yeah, that's the prequel.
But yeah, so after they get the full rundown of what's going on the farm, they are now in the loop, and they decide that it's time to go convince Stanley to make everything stop. So Styx, Mark, and Jody go to Stanley, grandparents missing in action, and they go to ask Stanley to make things stop. Stanley at first doesn't want to because things are going his way, but he starts to kind of concede that like, yeah, things have gotten out of control, and he never meant for anyone to get hurt. He never had bad intention. It just kind of led to that place because of like the nature of the spells in the book and how it brings to life the scarecrows. It's not like the Silent Servant where it's like intentionally there for people to use them to do tasks. I think it's more of like a Evil Dead Necronomicon type deal where you've just got a general spell for bringing random things alive, and like it's up to you to try to control them and get them to do what you want. And the more you bring them alive, the more human they become, I guess. The less of a Pinocchio they are, and the more of a real boy they become. Yeah, so they try to use the book. Stanley has the book with him. They try to use it in this awesome ending scene where they're all surrounded in a giant circle in the cornfield by all the different scarecrows, which is like, this is where you really get to see the dedication to the costume. Like they didn't just make one scarecrow costume. They made like 8 to 6 different scarecrow costumes, if not like doubles of all of those. and they have them all up on the different hitching posts, which I guess is a continuity error because every time you see scarecrows on their like post, they're like never on the same post, and the posts are never in the same way at any given point. But just for the sake of the episode, I guess they wanted to have it really thematic at this ending part. And so you got this big circle of scarecrows, and Stanley tries to read the spell to put them all to sleep. But Stanley, being slow and a little bit not good at reading, accidentally reads the wrong page, and he wakens every scarecrow all at once to like their full capabilities.
Viola Butrasa, Esa Berrigan, Elotris Batisma. Viola Butrasa, Esa Berrigan, Elotris Batisma.
Oh no. No, Dad, you read the wrong chant. This is the one that makes him wake up. Oh no, run, go to the barn, go!
And this leads to every single scarecrow on the farm chasing them through the fields, trying to get them. They're running away, and they're running through the fields, and another moment of the scarecrows getting on to Jody. This is probably the least intimidating the scarecrow is the entire episode, I'd say, other than it being on the post and Sticks using it to kick it, but it's laying on the ground, just going like, wah, wah. Like, it's trying its best, I guess. It doesn't have legs anymore, so it's just like...
Yeah, I went limp.
It can do just hold your ankle and like... but it's kind of funny at the same time. But Jody's scream is great. They all get boarded up inside of a shed, or the barn, I guess, where the thresher is kept. And they've sealed themselves in, hoping to keep out the scarecrows. But this is when the scarecrows really exemplify their ultimate power and straight up just punch their way through the freaking barn. Like giant boards of wood, they have no problem just tearing down and punching through. It's like, and that was, as a kid, for me, like the scariest part, because they were like, okay, Jesus, they can punch through wood like that, like an entire house. Like, jeez, why didn't they break through the glass earlier? I guess their powers were just dampened, and now they're so strong that they could just, tear you apart basically if they get your hands on you.
It reminded me of The Shining with Jack Nicholson using the axe through the door. And it's like, here's Johnny.
Here's Straw Guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is probably the most intense the Scarecrow gets outside of the dive tackle with the actors. They're throwing them around. It's like a good old brawl. It would almost be comical if you took like some like wacky music and put it over top as opposed to what's going on, because it does get kind of funny with everyone throwing everybody around and the way it looks, and it goes on for a little bit long.
I immediately imagined that scene to be recreated with the Benny Hill music.
I thought the same thing.
Same. Benny Hill
and sped up just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Just a little bit faster too. Yeah, so that scene's pretty great. And just watching everybody like battle it out with the Scarecrows. Obviously the grandparents aren't present for obvious reasons. They can't really they are real old people. They can't actually take a stunt performer to the side. I guess it's okay to do it to kids. At least in the 90s it was.
They're resilient. They can handle a few. Right.
And that's about time the Thresher turns on. The Thresher that's been heavily referenced throughout the entire episode, the Chekhov's Thresher of the episode, finally comes into play. Thresher turns on. At first, it's who is it? But it turns out it's Mark, and he plows down all of the Scarecrows, which honestly is like, Mark, that's a terrible idea. Your whole family's there too. Like, you've given them no warning. You just turn the Thresher on, and you're just like, hope that the Scarecrows come forward and your family falls back and like they don't also get shredded. Seems like 5 feet of distance in there, so it kind of like
a lot of safety concerns.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, yeah, maybe. And he's never ridden the Thresher before. He was like always talking about how he's like, I finally get to ride the Thresher. You think I'll finally get to drive the Thresher? So he
This is
doesn't
why
even
you don't. This is why it stays in the barn, because if you're not careful, you're going to run everyone over, and there's going to be a lot more than straw in that exhaust pipe that like shoots it out. It's going to be blood and flesh as well.
Exactly right. You have little bales of just like entrails mixed with Scarecrow.
Yep.
So that'll be great.
Alice Cooper concert set.
So
but yeah,
how's the story end?
So the story ends off. They finally take down the Scarecrows, or so it seems. But when they're all having a good old time back home, and everyone's finally learned their lesson, and Stanley gets to have things a little bit his way, and and the kids get to have things a little bit their way, and they finally get to enjoy the last little part of their vacation how they want to. All of a sudden, they heard the thresher turn on outside, and they all panically look outside, and they see the thresher come barreling towards them, and they turn around and they realize that Stanley has accidentally picked up a random piece of paper that has fallen out of the transcript and sat on the floor of their living room, untouched and unmoved this entire time, through their entire resolution cycle. And he picks it up and he reads it. Despite not being great at reading, he can apparently read accurately enough to summon the Scarecrows again, and doesn't realize what he's reading until after he's read it. And because of that, he accidentally resummons them, and the Thresher has the Scarecrows coming to get them. And in my mind, I see it like this. I see it as, had Mark never gotten into the Thresher and used that against them, they never would have used the Thresher against them. Because I think the Scarecrows kind of learn based off of what they do. Like, they have an adaptive kind of quality. Like, at first, they didn't need to lock their doors. But once the Scarecrows figured out they could open doors, then they had to lock their doors. And then once they figured out they couldn't get in through the doors, they started banging on the windows, right? And once they learned that they could break it, they broke through the barn. So there's like kind of a progression of the Scarecrow's intelligence as the episode goes on, whether intentional or not in the writing. It seems like it's like almost like a Frankenstein's monster type deal, where like it's getting smarter as they get smarter as the time goes on. But yep, in good old Goosebumps fashion, it's a twist ending, and everybody maybe gets Thresher.
Everyone dies at the end.
Or they run to the other side of the house. And
let's not leave it to speculation. They're all dead. They didn't learn anything. That's why we're here.
Let's move on to Scariness.
I mean, Scariness for Silent Servant, I think a lot of it just comes from the imagination of what the Scarecrow could do if, controlled by the wrong person with the wrong intent. Again, it ties from like the be careful what you wish for kind of trope that was similarly seen in The Tale of the Twisted Claw. And, even just like some looming threat that could come at you like Zebo from Laughing in the Dark. It's all about how you think they're going to react to you when you confront them versus like straight up, oh, I'm coming after you. Oh, I'm gonna like tackle you in the cornfield and throw you off your bike. It's like somehow the less, I mean, that is spontaneous and that could be scary, but it's not like trying to read the mind of your enemy, where they just seem more sinister in the less that they do. They're just like waiting for the right moment to strike. And I felt like when this stuck with me as a kid, the Scariness really drew from the imagery, the editing, particularly like the moments when like the Scarecrow fell out on Ann and Jared. That used to scare me a lot because it was just so sudden, and like that weird like strobe flashback scene where the Scarecrow is recounting all of his memories before he melts like the Wicked Witch. That used to scare me a lot too, because it was like a close up of his face with the hollow eyes and the weird music and his breath breathing. I think that just a lot of it has to do with atmosphere in this tale. Like it's really well lit. There's high contrast use of shadows to really set the tone that you don't really feel comfortable being in this barn trying to figure out what's going on here, or the story behind why the farmer isn't alive anymore. We're typically in closed spaces and in moments of tension, so that really amplifies things when like Jared's going through the spells with Anne, and like trying to catch up with the Scarecrow too, and finding the Scarecrow. They don't really go too much into the cornfield, surprisingly, like as you would expect. The only instance where we see that happen is when we see the silent servant emerge from the corn as he's about to approach Mr. Peterson on the tractor. But I think a lot of it just has to do with like the cinematography and the atmosphere and how it really sets up this character to be someone you want to fear, without really thinking that Jared's doing all the manipulating here, and that he's the one that needs to be feared because he's a selfish kid who just is fueling his like deepest desires without considering the repercussions of the kind of commands he's giving out willy-nilly with this black magic. And I think that really connects it to reality, in the sense that if you're dealing with people who don't know what they're dealing with, and it's like a powerful force, whether it be like magic or influence or anything else you can think of, that can create a lot more fear and dread, because the consequences are a lot greater and a lot more could go wrong. So really it just kind of taps into that psychological level with Are You Afraid of the Dark, and trying to predict what's going to happen through all these different commands that are being given out.
Jordy, Scariness for your episode.
Yeah, so I think for me, I've said it a few times already, but like this was one of the scarier episodes to me as a kid from the full series. Now, given like my scariness on things, sometimes it was weird. Like the Strange Peas episode of Goosebumps also scared me, and that's just a baby that like talks, so not that scary to other people. But
you don't like string peas? Because that's pretty scary to me.
Yeah, string peas are scary. Green vegetables are scary.
hey, don't get me started on this deep nightmare that I used to have of Sesame Street, where like Cookie Monster was rapping because rapping was popular back then, and he had like the giant vegetables singing, and I used to be scared of the broccoli character. I was like, they showed the giant broccoli singing the healthy food song, and it was just like, get away from me, you're like a huge puppet with eyes that's talking, and you're like gonna come out of the TV and like land on me and smush me.
Yeah, Sesame Street had some creepy things too. I had some nightmare fuel from Sesame Street as well. Yeah, so the Scarecrows are really scary. I think they did a great job with the mask. I think the mask, although like a latex mask, are able to like kind of emote a few different emotions, like, and not, at least not a few different, but like an angry, and like even when it's like grabbing onto her, almost kind of like a sad or like desperate emotion. So they did a good job with that, but just like it's that visceralness of them and like their ability to break things very easily, the way they pound on the windows. It just felt really real. Like it didn't seem dumbed down for kids, like the way they act. Like it, I mean, like once they make contact, sure, they like they pull punches because it's a kid show. They literally can't go any farther, but they went as far as they could with like drumming up the fear. And like a lot of that has to do with the Goosebumps soundtrack being like A+ a lot of the time. But yeah, between the stings and like the way they set it up, it's really scary. I do think though, and I probably forgot to mention this in the story moment because it's not really that important in the episode, but it is the scariest part of the entire episode. Jody has a nightmare about her parents turning into scarecrows, and it really has no other place other than Jody being afraid of scarecrows and somehow mixing that with her grandparents. But her grandparents aren't ever like almost made into scarecrows at any point in the episode, so it doesn't really follow anything thematically. But that the way they did like the makeup of like half scarecrow, half actually the actors' faces.
Yeah, that threw me off too.
Yeah, that terrified me as a kid. Like you could see their eyeballs, which I think is what made it so much scarier. Like the looks on, and they were smiling, and yeah, it just looks so messed up and scary. Like, and that's probably not supposed to be the scariest part of the episode, but it comes off and is the scariest part. So I mean, although it's not the actual villain themselves, that like dream sequence that she has is like the penultimate scariest part of the entire episode. And like they're gonna die at the end because the Thresher's coming after them. That's pretty scary too. But yeah, they're very brutal, they're very scary, and where it isn't the brutal scariness, it's that creepy scene with the grandparents, that uncanny valley scarecrow makeup.
And to save on time, let's save on the rebuttals, and go straight into use of the Scarecrow.
I believe the Scarecrow theme is rather effective here. There's a gradual buildup to the introduction of the Scarecrow and Silent Servant, and while we see him established in his typical role at first, we quickly see the progression of his effect on the Peterson farm when we see things going on behind the scenes that he's doing, such like the fence, the dugout, going after Mr. Peterson. He only does 3 things in the episode, so I'm just going to reiterate those over and over. While it may not have an army of scarecrows coming out of the cornfields to attack people like the Goosebumps counterpart, it doesn't really need it. I think, yet again, less is more is the approach here, because it maximizes the effectiveness of the Silent Servant through the imagery, the lore building, the misuse of the black magic that turns it into an object of destruction, essentially a weapon based on Jared's desires. And while it does break immersion by seeing the Scarecrow kind of move at the end after not having it seen move, kind of like just assuming that it moved, it was at a point where it's necessary for him to take action. Like, you can't really murder someone by just standing still. You got to move and get it done, unless you have like a crossbow, and I'm pretty sure he didn't. I mean, if the rural setting certainly helps with that. I like seeing the Scarecrow being dumped on the side of the house as like a cover for the Scarecrow when he wasn't being used or terrorizing the kids when they were taking out the trash. I thought that was very effective. It just demonstrates like how throwaway these kinds of devices are in terms of being used to scare crows on the farm and just being disposed of when they're done. I mean, it's just old clothing and hay, so you don't expect much of it or usefulness of it beyond that. I think Are You Afraid of the Dark gets a lot of mileage out of the Silent Servant in that regard. It does what it needs to do. It doesn't take up too much time. It acts like a scarecrow. It's like, it's not overacting, but it's not underacting either, where we see that typical like Jesus pose, just to kind of reinforce that it's an inanimate object. So the one moment when we see it come to life in the climax, it's that much more jarring, and it leverages it to get the plot resolved after we see it go after the kids and then be defeated when the magic runs out.
All right, Jordy.
Yeah, so I think the use of the scarecrows in Goosebumps were done well. I don't think that they were done badly in any way. Like, I've given it tons of props. I said it's the scariest episode to me, especially, or one of the scariest to me, especially as a kid. I think, though, it is just your generic use of a scarecrow story. They don't really add a lot onto it. I mean, a lot of this falls off the back of a movie that came out in like the 1980s, like Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, which is like the first Scarecrow movie, evil Scarecrow movie. That was like a horror movie, I guess you should say. And like, it used that basic conceit of like, what happens if like scarecrows come possessed with life and they start taking over, and in that movie, they took over a small town. In this, they take over the farm, right? So this is very much paying homage to that original Scarecrow story, Dark Knight of Scarecrow. Whereas that one was more of a story of revenge. This is more of a story of like getting, what one wants instead of, like getting vengeance or revenge on anybody. It's just trying to get your day in the spotlight. But the Scarecrow use overall, pretty good. I like their forcefulness. I like the way they use them as like this like magic system, so they're not just like random supernatural occurrence that's happening on the farm that nobody knows why it started, and it's not like some weird thing like the moon comes up once every 100 years and scarecrows come alive or anything like that. It's very much grounded like in the characters themselves to like pull the proverbial trigger to like make this happen or like let this take place. But then when you look at the Are You Afraid of the Dark Silent Servant, I think they did a great job with the fact that like they knew they didn't want to just do a scarecrow story. It would have been too simple just to do a scarecrow story, especially since Goosebumps had already done it in a book, and that would have just looked kind of bad to exactly copy. But maybe there's even more thought put into it that I don't know about. But I like that they made the Silent Servants kind of their own thing with their own lore, with that like cool like totem stick that holds a scroll on the inside of it. So I think they got a lot of use out of it by not limiting it just to like the practical uses of a scarecrow on a farm, but like building a backstory behind why these things even exist in the first place. So.
All right, and we go into our final category before I give the verdicts, which is, does it still hold up? Brett?
Yes.
Done.
If you live in a rural setting, and especially if you live on a farm, it's still relevant today. I don't think it really needs to be pigeonholed to a specific time unless like agriculture doesn't exist anymore. And considering that I used to live in a farm town before I moved to my current place of living, it was very believable. I lived near a cornfield and I saw scarecrows there. So, maybe if I showed up there at night, I would end up seeing some walking scarecrows milking the cows or like moving hay or just taking care of the crops. It's like one of those things in the back of your mind that think, oh, it could be possible while everyone else is asleep.
Jordy, does yours still hold up?
Yeah, so I think my Goosebumps episode definitely still holds up. Like, yeah, some of the Goosebumps episodes get cheesier as time goes on, but obviously that cheese plays into like what people love about Goosebumps as they get older. But the scary factor still holds. The grandparents scene where the grandparents like faces are really creepy. The way that the scarecrows break down doors and stuff still holds weight the older you get. Even as an adult, it's still a creepy idea to think of somebody breaking down just a wall to get to you, right? So yeah, I think it still holds up 100%.
All right. Well, your arguments are put in, and now we are going to start going through the points, and I will give my verdicts for each one, starting with main character. Both were female lead and male lead, and they were related in some form, and usually the boy was either a jerk or a whiner, and the girl was usually the voice of reason. But there is one factor that really pushes it over the edge for me as to which one is the clear winner, and that so many horror movies and horror TV shows have done this one trope, and it always drives me nuts. Does nobody know how to read quietly? Do you have to say the words out loud when you are reading?
It won't work if you keep it to yourself.
Yeah, just read it and go, you know what? I probably shouldn't say this out loud, and tuck it away.
Right.
But then again, you wouldn't have the plot of the episode. But still, when the character, and again, I don't know their names, but when the boy on Are You Afraid of the Dark just reads it, just to read it, and much at the frustration of his cousin, nope, I'm pig-headed, I'm stubborn, I'm a mule, I'm going to do what I want to do just because I want to. Whereas the characters on Goosebumps, this has already happened. So now they're walking into a situation, and that makes them a little more, well, I don't want to say a little more, that puts them in a whole different league, because they are the protagonists who are trying to survive, whereas this wouldn't happen if you had just kept your freaking mouth shut. So for that reason alone, I give main character point to Goosebumps. And for supporting character, I really like all the characters for the supporting characters. I really side with the dad in Are You Afraid of the Dark when I was watching it again, because being a dad, you don't see a lot of strong supporting parental figures in these kinds of shows. Usually they're dumb, or they're off doing their own thing, or not at all worried about their children. He is, as Brett had said, he's strict, but he's also very, you understand why he's strict. And he's also, this is a job, and you're here, you're going to pull your weight. And if you don't abide by my rules and you decide to not do anything, there will be punishments. But it wasn't malicious in any way. It was just a teaching tool. And the same with the brother, who was very much cut of the same cloth. And I really appreciated that, because you don't see that a lot. Whereas over on Goosebumps, the grandparents were super sweet. And they were very nice and very, oh yes, I'm so happy to see you. It's good to see you. And that was really cool to see too. But again, very much the same as the main characters. There was one thing that just really could have saved everyone a bunch of trouble. And Jordy hit it right on the head of the nail. Can you guys come over another time? They would not have put their grandchildren in dire jeopardy if you had just no. It's, and yes, Stanley is watching, but you can, you know what, we're kind of busy, or we're trying to spend time with Stanley. I mean, you could have said anything and Stanley not be aware of it, and or catch on to, please don't come over. So for that reason, I give the supporting characters to Are You Afraid of the Dark? So we are at 1 and 1. Villains, obviously, both have scarecrows. One has a scarecrow, one has a league of scarecrows. But as for one thing that pushes it over the edge is how they came to life. And whereas on Are You Afraid of the Dark, you have the kind of an origin story of where this, well, it's an origin story. The very beginning is you've got this really maniacal, you're gonna pay, but over in Goosebumps, you don't have that. It's just a book. And it's, you know, Simple Jack is reading it, and it's not the same thing. So for the simple origin story to go with the Scarecrow, I give the point to Are You Afraid of the Dark? Now we move to story, and I think something that we had touched on earlier is one of the reasons that I think Are You Afraid of the Dark stories are a little more cohesive is because it was designed for television, whereas Goosebumps was designed as novels for kids or preteens. And one thing that I really got frustrated with at Goosebumps was the twist ending. And because it didn't feel like an ending, it felt like the next chapter, because it felt like, I'm an action movie junkie. It felt like Assault on Precinct 13, whereas they're all now in one room, and now they're in the barn with the Thresher, and okay, we got out of that. This felt like building up to the climax, and then the climax was, oh crap, they're in the Thresher and they're coming after. You guys are doing the tractor scene off Gremlins. It's time to go do something now. And it felt like they need to do more, but of course they can't because they don't have the time. But then it just ends there, and I'm going, come on, you could do so much more. It didn't feel like a clear-cut ending, whereas Are You Afraid of the Dark had their ending, because they only had one Scarecrow to deal with, so they didn't have to worry about focusing on all of this. And they also didn't have to focus on Stanley, who is controlling all this. Just there's so much context for Goosebumps, which is great for a book, but for a concise story, Are You Afraid of the Dark gets the point. As for scariness, there is the less is more, and then there is also the big booming atmosphere, or not big booming atmosphere, but just big boom. And it is very obvious that Are You Afraid of the Dark is more on atmosphere and Goosebumps is more about the jump scare. But I do think that Goosebumps had a lot of atmosphere in this one, more so than I've seen in most Goosebumps episodes. Are You Afraid of the Dark really had that sense of, this thing is alive. I know it's alive. I want this thing's going to move at any minute, and it never does until the very end, which really pays off well. And also that slow creep onto I assume it was the dad. I had forgotten by now.
Yeah.
That slow creep onto the dad, and then teleports from one place to the next when the curse is lifted, which okay, now I'm going to come after the person who's been controlling me. Like, how dare you control me? That idea is pretty terrifying. But Goosebumps has a league of them, and when there's, instead of one, you got a whole bunch, and that's a little more terrifying to me as well. And I really, gosh, I'm putting my hands down. I really loved it's moving, but it's not moving. Where the heads are just barely moving, but it could be the wind, it could be something, although clearly we know it's not. And also the ending scene when they're in that circle really reminded me of the junkyard scene of Nightmare Before Christmas, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, when they're trying to face off Freddy Krueger. It really reminded me of that, where you know they're there. I can see they're there. I'm trying to get this defeated before they come after me, and then the raid on the farm. You know they're outside. You now have a zombie attack. Only it's straw and clothing. And I was not afraid of the grandparent scarecrows. I thought it looked kind of silly and cheesy, but again, that's Goosebumps. It's got its boo scares, but it had a lot of atmosphere too, and I think it had more to offer for an audience in terms of scariness than Are You Afraid of the Dark did, because Are You Afraid of the Dark had one thing. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're known to do. And it's worked really well for us. Whereas Goosebumps had a bit of both in this one. And both works depending on which one you like. So for scariness, I go with Goosebumps. Use of the Scarecrow, I do like that, like Brett had said, where they showed it's a scarecrow. It's nothing to be afraid of. Why are you guys afraid of this? And they didn't really, quote unquote, do anything with it until the end. And Goosebumps, there's a ton of them, but they did more with it. The episode starts with seeing them in the shadows, coming to the door and knocking on the door, and they're active during the day. And it's kind of like Halloween. If you can't get away from Michael Myers during the day, you're screwed at night. And kind of the same thing with the scarecrows. It's a light tormenting, but once the sun goes down, you're mine. And I think that, and also grandparent scarecrows, I really think that they utilized scarecrows more, not necessarily authentically, but they did more. They had more scarecrows, and they did more with the scarecrows in Goosebumps than they did Are You Afraid of the Dark. So I give the point to Goosebumps. So once again, we're 3 for 3.
Oh boy.
And does it hold up? Yes, both do hold up. But which one, I think what puts it over the top is the overall ending. One has a very clear, this is a lesson that we have to give, whereas the other one was, okay, this is a fun action / horror episode. And I think what resonates more with an audience is usually the lesson learned. And just for that alone, I give the point to Are You Afraid of the Dark? And the win goes to Silent Servant.
Woo!
But it really was close.
Yeah, just like the other one, Phone Police versus Calling All Creeps, it just came down to the end. I wonder if this is going to be a pattern for things to come.
And I promise it is not intentional at all.
You're taking Brett's side.
No.
And I know there's going to be somebody out there who thinks that, but
I mean, in the future, we can just have me do all Goosebumps or all Are You Afraid of the Dark or all Judge or something to keep it consistent.
It's fine.
But looks like we got 1-1 now so far for the Are You Afraid of the Dark versus Goosebumps series. Calling All Creeps won the first verses, and now Silent Servant won the second. So they're going to be neck and neck until we figure out what our third one's going to be.
Who
later
will the
this year.
champion become? You know, it's
I don't know.
question. It's right now they're neck for neck.
Yeah.
So whoever takes the lead next.
The war rages on. It just happens to be that I was on both winning sides. So maybe I'll judge the next one so that people don't think we're onto something.
Some sort of confirmation bias going on.
No, I assure you.
No. No.
Cool. Well, that was
100% authentic.
Yeah. Well, that was very fun. Thank you, Jordy. There was
it's awesome.
fun fight, fair battle. Great points made all around. Alex, thank you for moderating. We're going to do a quick rename game because this is something that's exclusive to versus battles, specifically these. So let's jump right into that. All right. So how rename game works is that whoever's like defending their own story, they get to rename their own story, and then whoever judges gets to give a name for both stories, and then we post it on Instagram, and people usually vote for the ones that they like the most, and we usually announce the winner for each title. And last time when I polled it, I believe Revenge of the Reptilians won overall. But that also won for the Goosebumps titles, and then the Tale of the Prank Prison. No, the Tale of the Sorcerer's Sister won for Phone Police. So for anyone who's curious and you happen to be a patron, now you know. For everyone else, you got to become a patron to find out. But for the Tale of the Silent Servant, this was a tough one for me because I actually came up with two. So I guess I'll run it by you, Alex, and see which one you like more, and we'll stick with that. I came up with the Tale of the Straw Man Stalker or the Tale of Scream Acres.
I like Straw Man Stalker.
All right, Straw Man Stalker it is. We also might be too young to get the Green Acres reference, so you're out. How about you, Jordy? What do you rename the Scarecrow Walks at Midnight?
So if I had to rename Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, same as you, I got kind of tied between two names. On the one hand, What Hides Behind the Corn Stalks? But on the other hand, They Come at Midnight.
I like the corn stalks ones. It raises a question for the viewer and it starts to spark their imagination.
I agree.
And it may not be assumed it's scarecrows, could be children or baseball players, as we've seen in other instances.
For the Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I actually thought about this after I put it together. But the episode also reminds me a bit of Fantasia, when Mickey Mouse was controlling the broom handles and the mops to do the chores until it got to the point where it was out of control, which was the original intention for what they were doing with the scarecrows. And of course, that was the Sorcerer's Apprentice. So I thought of the Tale of the Straw Apprentice. Oh. Which then I realized, oh crap, that's very similar with what RJ said for the last episode, but I'm still sticking by that because I thought that was a fun title.
All right.
And just because the last half of, or the last act of Goosebumps reminded me of Assault on Precinct 13, Scarecrow Assault.
Very like appropriate, especially in that barn scene with the thresher.
Yeah, right.
Cool. Well, we'll post those on Instagram once this episode goes live, and you guys can vote, and we'll find out at our next versus which titles win. Without further ado, here's This or That. This or that. This or that. Time to play This or That. Very cool. So let's start with this. Alex, since you're the judge, you might as well be asking these questions to each of us.
Okay. All right. So for This or That question 1, which do you prefer, Scarecrow or Scary Crows?
I prefer Scary Crows. We see scarecrows very often in entertainment media, and I want to see what people can do with blackbirds running amok, kind of like in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. So I think we need more of that. And considering that I once read a Goosebumps 2000s book called Revenge or Us with a scary crow on the front cover, that would be a great one to adapt as a TV episode.
Yeah, I'd go with Scary Crows too. Scary Crows. It's just one of those things that you've seen a Scarecrow story, you know how it goes. But Scary Crows is like, it could be like, The Birds, Alfred Hitchcock. It could be like Birdemic, or it could be like something all different altogether, like a legion of evil crows trying to take over a town. That would be interesting as well. So I'd go with Scary Crows. That sounds like a more interesting story.
Untapped potential.
And I agree with you both. I also choose Scary Crows. Question 2, are you afraid of the dark, Mark, or Goosebumps, Mark?
Oh, you know my answer. He's a big old lovable bear. I'm going to go with Are You Afraid of the Dark, Mark?
I will go with Goosebumps, Mark, because chocolate chip pancakes. You can't eat chocolate chip pancakes.
Are you afraid of the dark, Mark?
Good choice.
Question 3, baseball or black magic?
Black
magic woman.
I know, right? I mean, I used to play baseball a lot as a kid, and I did enjoy the sport while it lasted. But I don't really know how to use black magic. I don't know anything about black magic. And I feel like unless I had someone teaching me how to use it properly, I would get myself into a lot of trouble. So I'm going to go with baseball because it's what I know.
I'm going to go black magic because although baseball is fun and is good pastime, it has no real practical use in my life. I can't shorten my workday with baseball. I can't get something from far away with baseball. I can't get somebody to do stuff for me with baseball.
But you can get rich with baseball cards.
I could get rich with baseball cards. Probably more in the 90s than I could now, but yeah, I think I'd go with black magic. It seems like it has more utilitarian helpfulness outside of, the caveat that eventually something will take my soul or my penance will come due. But
you might have to go to Hogwarts before you're adept at it, though, because all these kids we've seen so far in both of these series don't know how to use it well.
Yeah, we need some Snapes passed around so everybody gets a little bit better at the dark arts.
And I will absolutely get myself in trouble. So baseball.
Nice. Got to break some windows.
Question 4, Old Man Earlstead or Grandpa Kurt?
I'm gonna go with Grandpa Kurt, believe it or not. I mean, I wasn't that much of a fan of the Goosebumps episode in comparison, but I liked his vest. I liked his warm, inviting demeanor. I like that he wanted to catch frogs. That sounds like fun. Something I would want to do with a grandpa. He wasn't there much, but neither was Old Man Earlstead, so that's why they're on this level. Yeah.
I'd go Old Man Earlstead, which is funny because now we're going into each other's territory. But, yeah, I don't know. He's just like one of those classic mustache twirling villains that you just like love. He's just like so boisterous and loud and so confident in his actions that you just want to see him be the villain for the entire episode, which is kind of a bummer that you don't see him anymore in the episode. I get it. He's dead, so whatever. But we could get a ghost. We can get a ghost going here.
Right.
I guess this is why you and I are co-hosts, because I also choose Grandpa Kurt. And the ironic thing is he looks and sounds just like one of our clients who we take care of at work. I actually showed a short clip to my boss and said, "Hey, look, it's this guy." And she went, and she took a look and went, "Oh my God, right." And he is a very, very sweet man. So, I mean, I like Grandpa Kurt as a character, but also because he reminds me of our clients. So definitely Grandpa Kurt.
It's actually funny you mentioned that too, because he reminds me of Grandpa Teresiano in my family tree. My uncle's father that I used to visit in Vermont growing up. Very, very similar look with the white hair, big stocky body, and the clothing. So I think there's a personal connection there that does it.
Question 5, Crazy George or Stanley?
Oh, I gotta go Crazy George. The crazier, the better in my book. I mean, I'm just moved by his riveting speech about rainbow lights and then blackness, and then not being able to handle the awesome power of controlling the silent servants en masse. So I want to see what he's up to, and if we ever get a sequel featuring him as the main villain, commanding an army of silent servant scarecrows.
Yeah, so for me, I'd say it's tough because it's like, on the one hand, I think Stanley does a great job. The actor does a good job of playing him. And he's pretty convincing, like, doesn't quite know what he's doing, but is getting into trouble regardless kind of demeanor. And I think he just has like a good look for the role he's playing, which I think comes more to the casting side. But even saying that, I'm going to go with Crazy George, with the reason being that awesome speech that he gives about the dragon, his monologue about the dragons.
My dragons! Have you seen my dragons?
The dedication in that scene alone, and how hard he goes with his acting chops on a children's Canadian horror anthology TV show for one episode is great. So yeah, it goes.
Oscar worthy.
I would go with Stanley, just because I feel for the dude. I would want to just talk with him and encourage him and build him up, so that way he wouldn't have to resort to the dark arts to get his way.
So kind.
Yeah, he's kind of like Ricky, except he has more redeeming qualities here.
Yeah. Number 6, farm life or city life?
Farm life. I grew up in a rural town. I still miss it. I've been in cities before. I don't like it as much, but I like visiting cities. So I'm leaning more towards farm life.
City all the way. I like the city. I used to live in the South and in the countryside at points, but city all the way. More options. I like options.
And yeah, I cannot do farm life. I will go nuts. So city life. Last question. Twin Dragon Talisman or Spellbook?
Twin Dragon Talisman. I mean, just look how cool that is. Even if you don't even utilize its full power, it'd make a great paperweight for your office.
I'm going with Spellbook because there's definitely more pages in there, and they probably don't have anything to do with evil scarecrows. So I would just get to that part of the book and skip past all the evil scarecrow nonsense. So I take Spellbook.
I will take the Twin Dragon Talisman just because I know I can use it as some kind of a decor, and nobody will think twice about it and do something with it.
It would look great on a mantle. All right. Thank you for another round of this or that, guys. It was a lot of fun to hear all your answers. Now for our closing question before we wrap up and head home. Which episode do you prefer today? Are you more partial to a silent servant, or do you like Scarecrow Walks at Midnight? Let us know at our email address, splatattack21@gmail.com, and we'll mention it in a future Mona's Mailbag segment. I think we had enough fresh air in the country air for one night. Let's head back to the lab, and we'll actually meet up with James Bond, 90s Nick style, to see where our secret mission will be in our next Patreon bonus episode. It'll be a fun exercise to see which connections we can make to 90s Nick and 90s nostalgia with this memorable movie character. So if you're into gadgets and spy work, you won't want to miss this. Thank you to our current patrons, Monica, Kyle, Marley, Kat, and Aaron, for helping us make all of our exclusive bonus content possible. We are very grateful for your support. If you enjoy what we're doing so far, tell a friend and head on over to our Patreon page where you can access all this exclusive bonus content like bonus episodes, behind the scenes, gag reels, and more. I believe we have another live stream coming up at the end of this month, so you won't want to miss that. Definitely join in and become a patron today. Also, if you prefer not to be a patron, but you want to see some cool Splat Attack merch in your house, head on over to our bonfire page. We have various t-shirts that you can wear, and also hoodies and sweatshirts and all sorts of things that you can wear, in addition to a Splat Attack mug too. So if you're interested in that, head on over there, show your support. Thank you, Jordy, for joining us once again. We had a lot of blast talking about Are You Afraid of the Dark versus Goosebumps in our second Versus episode, and we'll definitely have to have you back again for some other occasion.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. It's always fun to come back on the Splat Attack podcast and just chat about the nostalgia stuff. It's always fun. So appreciate you guys both having me.
Thank you, Jordy.
Thank you.
Good long 2-hour talking.
Almost 3.
3 hours.
So,
yeah, no, it's always fun. Always a pleasure, guys. I can't wait to come back if you guys ever want to have me again. So
awesome.
Let's see what the fans think.
Do you want to plug anything while you're here?
Well, just the same old. It's Nostalgia Utopia on Instagram, Utopian Nostalgia, all one. And if you just type that in, you'll find me. We're typical nostalgia, 80s, 90s. Recently just got my hands on some 30th anniversary Crystal Pepsi. So,
Ooh, I did see that.
you guys want to check out some of the cool stuff with that, you can go pop on over there and check it out. But yeah,
What does it taste like?
it tastes like Pepsi, but better because it's crystal clear, and
Ooh.
that makes it that much better. It kind of messes with your brain because you're thinking Sprite, and then you get cola, and you're like, how can cola be clear? But they do it. They did a great job. It's not the original recipe. It's got high fructose corn syrup, but 2022.
Still nostalgic.
Yeah, so go on over, check us out. We got all sorts of stuff going on there. We got a shop, we got the Instagram, we got Twitter. But yeah, and then big VHS collection. So if you guys ever want to see new VHSs or join for the thrift hunt episodes, we've always got those going too. But yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you, Jordy. Alex, will you drain the slime tank for us, please? I think there's some hay caught in the phloem filter.
Aye, co-captain. Maybe that explains why I found this straw hat just now.
Splat you later. I guess I got some chores to do before my baseball game.
Reprise the theme song and roll the credits.
Hard to believe, folks, but it's time to say goodbye.
Nighty-night.
Hey, check us out next time for more adventure and another great legend of the Hidden Temple.
What'll we do till then?
Chill for a couple. We'll be back. You're on, Nick.
And it was time for the superhero to move on. I declare this meeting of the Midnight Society closed.
Bye-bye.
Wow, is that neat?
What you doing?
Oh, hi, Stanley.
A scarecrow walks at midnight.
Stanley, are you confused again?
Fox kids, beware.
It was alive! How can it be alive?
Lock your doors. Stay inside. Because the Scarecrow walks at midnight. Look out for an all-new Goosebumps next Saturday at 9 a.m. on Fox Kids. It's the one and only scare.